John, you ever shit in an eco-friendly toilet before?
Sorry?
Have you ever shit in an eco-friendly toilet?
Is that like a plane where they just like farted out the bottom or?
No, So I went to Queensland like last year or whatever, like late last year, and we road tripped up there. And so we stayed at a bunch of different like Airbnbs and stuff like that. And one of them on the way home was a tiny house because Em loves tiny houses and I don't because I don't fucking fit in them. But the toilet, because it was like off the grid, the toilet was just essentially just a compost bin. Like it was still a toilet, but instead of there being water in there, it was just mulch and tan bark. So the the thing that like goes through your mind, you know, like when you drink Sprite when you think it's going to be water and you're like, whoa, hold on a second. Like that's what happened to me when I took a dump and was expecting there to be a sound of water splashing, but it just splat. It was just a splat noise.
Yucky. What if you got the runs, man?
I didn't have the runs.
Just sounds like you're watering the garden or something.
Welcome back to Real Talk, everybody. Fuck yeah.
Another week.
We made it back.
We done it, baby. We did it.
I just got a message from my boss to come in early tomorrow, so that's dope.
Oh, God. Bosses, am I right?
I just got to say, sorry, I can't. I am my own boss, and I make a podcast, so...
And then you get fired.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, welcome back. Another week. We've made it. We've done it. Another week of us chatting shit in your ear for an hour to an hour and a half.
It's not that. You can't say that. You can't say that it's just us chatting shit.
Sorry.
Because we're...
and you're learning while we're doing it.
Yes. Yeah. This podcast is here for a reason.
Yes. Educational purposes.
I keep thinking about that. I just can't stop thinking about like us being like, oh, yo, we should make a podcast, and being like, nobody fucking cares. But in good news, I did check. Literally this morning, we had 42 downloads.
What does that mean?
That means that
like people have like saved the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh wow, 42. Is that independent, or is that like because we've released 2 episodes?
That is.
So it'd be 21 people. Or is that like, is that how it works? Or is it 42 independent accounts?
Maybe. It's just like, it's just how many downloads on the one episode and how many downloads on the other episode combined. So it could be the same people, but I mean, even
people
then.
People are downloading it.
Yeah, isn't that fucking weird?
Is that so you can like listen to it like in the car or something if you don't have like Wi-Fi or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I do. I have like 3 different podcasts where I have like 300 episodes downloaded. It's a problem. It's a real problem. I should undo that because it's uses a lot of data to download all of them.
That's pretty cool though. That's really cool. Thank you so much all for the support. On that, make sure you are also voting us 5 stars if you can. It gets us up that ranking of the history section, which I still don't think we've changed.
We have. I promise.
I checked yesterday. I hadn't changed, but that's okay. That's all right.
Wait, what part do you mean?
Well, because if you go to the actual podcast on Spotify, it just says it's a history genre and there's no other genre assigned.
Yeah, I was seeing that, and then like there was another time where I clicked on it and it said history and comedy. So I'm so confused.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's different for everyone. Maybe because I only really listen to history podcasts, so maybe it's just like genre. Like anyway, if you do vote us 5 stars, it does move us up the rankings and the leaderboards and the tier lists of the different genres, and that means that we'll more likely be seen by more people, and more people means more episodes. That's how it works.
Django's here as well, by the way, my dog. So this is going to be this one's going to be off the rails.
Dog here.
We're going to be pausing. We're going to be cutting a lot out. Django's like sticking his head in my work bag and stuff like that. So that's pretty sick.
He's on guard mode at the moment. Look at him. He's as straight as an arrow. Look at him.
Did you take a photo of me while I was looking underneath the couch?
No, I should have though.
John was saying it looks like when your kid says that there's like a monster under his bed and you have to check, because he was just looking under the couch and I had to go and look under there with him because I was trying to figure out what he had dropped under there, and there was just nothing there.
I've seen a lot of memes online at the moment where it's like Gen Z parents like looking under the bed for their kids for the monsters, and they're like,
they're all so scared.
Yeah, what if there's someone under there, you know?
Dude, I keep doing that to myself. I keep like fucking with my own brain in the middle of the night, where I'm like, oh, imagine if I walk around this corner
and
there was just like
still slide open.
No.
After I fucked with the things when I was
think what was happening was
like jammed something in it.
I think that we had a lot of clothes in it. What's good, bro? What's up?
He's got something stuck in his mouth.
Yeah. Can you get it, or does Dad need to come help?
He got it. He's good.
No, he's just having a fucking complex.
He looks so human. It's awful.
It's kind of weird. Let's stop talking about him, otherwise he'll get excited.
Yeah, true.
I was trying to check and see if it specifically said categories here.
So the feedback has been amazing. A lot of people super hyped about it. A lot of people talking about it. It's pretty cool. A lot of people in our circles, our existing circles, which is really sick. If you are listening and you're not in our usual circles, make sure you tweet at us. Our various, I think, Twitters, both our Twitters, are linked now on the episodes.
Yes.
On the main Spotify page. Also, if you're coming from YouTube, they'll be in the description. Make sure you have a peek at those. Let us know if you don't know who the hell we are, but you do listen to us ramble on about history for an hour and a half every week. That'd be really cool. Let us know. And look, if you want to be part of the circles, join. I presume, is your Discord link there too?
Maybe. I'm not sure. Probably
Either
not,
way, tweet at us some questions, anything you want us to talk about, topics even. Let us know. Because that'd be really cool, and we'd really like your input and feedback.
Fucking hell,
love it. That made me jump, man.
It's always when we're talking as well. It won't be like a quiet point and then he'll bark, so we can just cut it out. It's like just gonna have to cut out the middle of your sentence.
That's fine. I repeated it.
I check, and it's got primary category as history, but active categories is comedy and history.
Interesting. Okay,
so it doesn't show up unless you like look right into it.
Okay, right.
But yeah,
Makes
it is a history comedy.
I'll stop complaining. All right, right to that. Any feedback you want to read out this week? Any specific thing you've heard? Look, to break the illusion, it hasn't been very long since like last time.
Yes,
like we did the last episode last week. Obviously the first episode we ever did
was a month
prior to the second episode, so we had a lot of time to gain feedback. So if you want to be quick on the draw and be featured in something we do, or let us read out your feedback, make sure you shoot those in as quick as possible. As soon as you've heard it, you know. We haven't got any comments or anything that
besides that I wanted to talk about like how many downloads that we had.
Yeah, the 40. Was it 42?
42. Yeah,
that's
because I checked it literally this morning. I checked it a couple of days ago.
I think I have the podcast downloaded, so I'm not in that number.
That's fucked up.
I'm following it. I'm just
support yourself, man.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, I think like I checked maybe the day that I put out the other episode, one of the last episodes, and I hadn't checked since then, but since that point, it was at like 20 something, and I wanted to mention that, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just check in again. I'll just like refresh it real quick, and it was 42 downloads. So that's pretty sick.
That's really good.
Yeah,
that's sick, man. People are actually listening. Isn't that weird to think about?
It is weird. It is weird, and also like I think, for example, I'll have like, because we've both had plenty of like YouTube channels and stuff like that, so it's like you can kind of gauge where you should be at with a YouTube channel, but for a podcast, it's like we haven't properly done a podcast before, so it's like we don't have any frame of reference, so anything above 0 is good. So us being like, what, I want to say 42 times better, but it's also 42 times 0 is still 0. So
no, there was 2 because we were listening to ourselves.
True, yeah. So what, 20? Never mind.
21, mate.
Yeah, we'll move on.
What are we learning about today, Jack? Did I tell you? Do you remember?
The Heathens War or something.
The Great Heathen Army.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so the
War of the Filthy Heathens.
So the Great Heathen Army, as it was nicknamed, we're going to talk about that today, which was pretty much the culmination of the Viking invasions of England.
Before we talk about that, can we talk about how cool your phone is? Because you have one of the folding phones, not like an old like Motorola flip phone. Yeah, it's
I think it's the 4. It might be the 5. I don't remember.
You know what? Now that we have mentioned what phone it is, let me just clear the air real quick. This phone sucks. It's shit. Samsung, pay us. So and then we'll say good things about the phone.
I really like it.
It is weird when you see a phone that's got like joints. I don't know, man.
It's got elbows.
Yeah,
right?
you got a double jointed phone.
Yeah, man.
Some weird shit.
It's great. It's really useful. I was on like a video call the other day, and I just folded it like this.
Oh yeah, right.
And had it just sat there, and
like a DS.
Yeah, like a DS,
Game Boy.
like a half open DS. But this allows it to sit there, and I can read it while still.
Again, Samsung, pay us.
Yeah. Cool phone. Cool. I like the folds. They're sick.
Yeah, it's
phone
right.
case is dope. Spooky ghost boy. Spooky ghost chilling boy. Do you see him? Have you never noticed him? He's hard to see, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's hanging out there. Well, he's a ghost.
Yeah.
You don't easily see him hanging out. So today we're gonna talk about the Great Heathen Army, Jack.
John, I'm happy to be back.
Yeah.
I'm ready to learn.
Yeah, ready to learn?
Yep.
All right, let's go, baby. I'm gonna whip out the pointy stick. Now, if you for some reason you've jumped in on the fourth episode,
Yes.
if you've jumped in on the fourth episode to listen for the first time, first off, welcome. Second off, we have a map on the wall physically next to us. I point to it to explain things to Jack. I try and give brief kind of pointers to where I'm looking. But just a spoiler for this one, all of the things we're going to talk about today are in Northern Europe. So the lowest I'm going to go is Paris in France. Otherwise, it's all like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, or like the United Kingdom.
Or for the French listeners, Paris.
Hopefully there's none of them. So we...
All right, let's just scratch it off real quick. John hates Mormons and French.
Put on your bingo card, boys. All right. So, we're going to be talking about that today. So I'm not going to be really pointing out. It's not like last episode. No,
last episode
before
that. Yeah,
that was
a mess.
That was all like Japan and the Pacific and stuff. That was pretty crazy.
And you had to point over like my side.
Yeah,
and I was scared.
So if you want to whip up a map and follow along, you can. Otherwise, you can just Google Great Heathen Army, and you're generally going to be able to read what I'm reading. I'm not going to be reading off all of it. I'll be doing some off the top of my head because I do know stuff about this, thankfully. So I'm going to be discussing some of that as well. All right, let's get started, shall we? Have you ever seen the show Vikings?
No.
Vikings is about the Great Heathen Army, for the most part. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of stuff in that is completely talking out your ass. Like, for instance, there's a scene in one of the later seasons where you see the giant sea snake.
Loch Ness Monster.
Not the Loch Ness Monster. Jormungandr, I think his name is? I don't remember. Big snake. Anyway, big snake. It's just not true. There's a lot of like wacky shit in there. Norse. When I say Norse, I refer to the people of Scandinavia. So Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, sort of. Iceland, sort of. They both kind of came in a little later. And technically Estonia, a part of Scandinavia. They're technically considered Nordic people. But
Nordic is such like a badass word.
It's sick, innit?
Like,
yeah.
How have we gone from like everything was very like cool and medieval sounding, and then everything was like, oh yeah, I'm fucking Australian. And then it was like, I'm Nordic. Like,
yeah,
it's so powerful.
Yeah. So anyway, they were what's considered the Norse people. They were people who followed the Norse religion. There was a pantheon of gods. Pantheon means multiple gods, if you didn't know that. Like the Greeks, Romans.
Greek gods.
Yeah, like those guys. So what's the difference between the Greek and the Roman gods, Jack? Do you remember? We talked about this.
I want to say that they're pretty similar, but they had different names.
Yeah? Why do they have different names?
Because...
What are the Romans ones named after?
The... planet.
Yeah, well done.
And shit, that was actually right.
Yeah, it is right. And the Greek ones are the same, but not named after the planets. So, like, Venus and Aphrodite are the same god. One's named after a planet and one
gotcha.
Yeah. Anyway, throwback to a previous episode. I like to quiz Jack as we go along.
He really likes to fuck with my brain and just figure out if I was really paying
the Norse
attention.
gods, they followed them. So people like Thor, Odin, Loki, blah, blah, blah. You know,
those guys.
Those guys, Freya. You know, those kind of boys and gals hanging out up there in Valhalla and all that shit. They supported them. A lot of infighting. what we know now as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, they weren't things. It was mostly jarls that ran collections of land, a lot of split up places. Yeah, like Skyrim. A lot of like split up places. No, there wasn't really unified countries up here. The first like real unification you kind of saw was mostly like Denmark-ish. But the ideas of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway actually appeared around the time of their like Christian reformations when they became like Christian kingdoms. But that's far, far later than what we're going to talk about today. So anyway, from a little land right in here, you see that little word Kattegat? Yeah, right in the middle there. That's the name of the fjord in here. Fjord is the Vikings call these areas here. So,
John is pointing at like Denmark through.
So the little sea that's between Norway and Denmark, that is like the beginning of the fjords. And then you come down and it's like realistically like the little oceany bits in the Baltic that kind of are between all of the northern Scandinavian countries. Those are what's called fjords. So Kattegat, there was a little village there and a man named Ragnar Lothbrock came from there.
Such a powerful name.
So Lothbrock means baggy pants.
Okay, never mind.
Because when he was a child, he killed a snake because it bit into his pants, and because his pants were so baggy, they missed his leg, and so they called him Ragnar Lothbrock.
They called me baggy pants at school as well. That was because I had a lot of hand-me-downs.
Yeah, not quite as cool as Ragnar, but cool anyway.
I mean...
yeah, you are
that's
him.
What you're saying.
You are him. So Ragnar Lothbrock was born there, did some like shit as like a farmer and that, was like a warrior. Anyway, he was infighting, fucking around with the Jarls, didn't like the people in charge. He was a Dane, so he was technically from Denmark. The word Denmark and Danish were founded long before the idea of a kingdom of Denmark. Danes were what the people of Europe called Norse people. So if you were from anywhere in this region, you were a Dane. Like how we call them Vikings now. Back in the day, they just called them Danes. I want to say in 700 and something, 787, AD. So we're going way back here.
That is pretty far back.
Yeah, way back. So
I wasn't even born yet.
You were not born yet. No. Fuck's sake, Jack. In 787, Ragnar and his merry band of raiders decided we're going to sail over here because a lot of these countries didn't even know England existed. It was just like a myth to them. It was like this land over the sea that had money and treasures, but they'd never heard of it, right? That's cool. So what they would do a lot is they would raid like Finland and the Baltic region and like some areas in the islands here. And raiding was getting tiresome. There wasn't a lot of money left. It was quite poor land. It was open farmland. There's no gold here. There's no money. There's no riches. There's no glory to be had, right? So these raiders, these sea peoples were like, okay, well, we've heard whispers of this land in the west. Let's just sail west. And so they did. They hopped on a little longship and went across the sea. Across the North Sea, if you're following along, and they landed in northern England, just above, well, Newcastle, if you're looking at a zoomed-out map, or just below it, actually. Just below it. They landed in that little place, couple of Danishmans, as the English called them, hopped off, fucked around a bit, killed a guy, stole some of their money, and then sailed back quickly to Denmark to report that, like, they had found this place, they'd found this really rich place. There were soldiers there. They obviously had money. So a little band of people returned in 793 to do the first official written recorded Viking raid on England. They attacked a church called Lindisfarne, which is in the northern part of England. Very famous church. There's actually a lot of streets and towns and stuff in various English colonized places, including Australia. There's actually a street down from me called Lindisfarne Street. It's a very popular name because it's quite an important piece of English history. There are definitely sections of the United States called Lindisfarne, those kind of things. So, big church raid. They did that, killed a bunch of people, got a bunch of money, and that kind of begun the Viking raids. So we're talking like 800 AD, so like Dark Ages at the moment. So this is after the fall of the Roman Empire. The whole of Europe is a fucking mess. Everyone's shitting in the street again.
Yeah.
The public toilets with the sponges on the sticks,
The
long
sponges
gone.
on the stick.
Long
wait, they're
gone.
gone?
They're long gone,
God damn
bro.
it.
They're shitting in the streets again. Not good. Not good. So the Great Heathen Army was formed by this famous Viking, Ragnar Lothbrock's sons. He had like fucking 6 sons or some shit. And they all wanted sections of this place because Ragnar sailed over here, fought like some fights and that, became all buddy-buddy with some of the kings. And then the king of the what area was called Northumbria at the time, which is like, okay, Jack's looking at a map now, but realistically kind of leads up to just below Edinburgh. That was Northumbria. So consider it just the northern part of England. It was all one kingdom. King Offa, I think his name was, he killed Ragnar Lothbrock because Ragnar was like raiding his land and shit, and he was like, fuck you, right?
Here's the tea.
He threw him in a pit of snakes and then watched him get fucking like eaten alive by snakes, pretty much.
It's all come full circle.
Why?
Because was he the one that got
Bit in the leg by a snake.
the snake?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got it.
Well done.
Got it up in here.
Well done.
Up in the old noggin.
Big brain boy. So he's like, fought off a snake. Well, watch this bitch.
Fight off these snakes.
Spartan kicks him into a pit. Anyway, he's in the pit. He dies. His sons learn about this, get pretty fucking upset. They're like,
Understandably.
you can't do that. So
John was doing the strong man's T-pose.
So bunch of guys from, because this man is like famous at this point. Ragnar was the one who found England. Like realistically, he was the written one that found England. He was the guy who brought the Nordic countries, the Norse countries, so much fame and wealth. He was like the king to them.
So he's like MrBeast.
He's like MrBeast, right? He's Mr. Breast of the 800 ADs, right? So when they threw him in the pit, it was like Mr. Beast.
So the title of this one is gonna be what the
Viking MrBeast,
the heathen army in MrBeast terms or something.
So he came over and he was like, "I'm going to raid this farm," and he did that, and then he brought the money back, and he was like, "We're giving out all this gold to our Viking friends." And they did that, and they gave out all the gold to the Viking friends. And then
next, they're going to open 3,000 ghost kitchens.
So then when Ragnar was killed, the heathens, they're called the Great Heathen Army because they weren't Christian. And anyone who isn't the same religion as you is a heathen.
Die.
No, is a heathen.
Yes.
So they gathered the Great Heathen Army, which according to a lot of people wasn't really that great because of the population census at the time and like realistically how many fighting men were actually able to fight. It was probably like a few thousand at most, maybe like 3,000 or 4,000. But at the time, because England was split into like 7 or 8 little kingdoms,
yeah, right.
One kingdom could probably field like 600 to 1,000 men at most. So to them, that is a colossal amount of people that they cannot win against. So anyway, they all form up, they come over, and they fuck the shit out of England, right? So I'm going to show you a funny little map in front of me.
That's a crazy porn title.
Oh, dude, fuck the shit out of England.
Viking fucks the shit out of England.
So I'm going to show Jack in front of me here, but I can explain it to you guys as well. So they landed in York, northern England, in York. That became like a Viking stronghold. So even now, York, or Jorvik, as it was called at the time by the Vikings, is still has like a lot of Viking like thing about it. It's quite like a prominent thing in their culture because it was the longest occupied land by Vikings in England. So they took all of that. They practically owned. You see, like where all this green is. Without the yellow, they owned like all of that, including the orange there. So everything, for the guys living at home, everything south of London, so where like it comes out like, underneath Plymouth and things like that in like Wales, all of that was English. Otherwise, everything else above it was all Viking.
That's crazy.
So the Vikings, not a lot of people know this, but the Vikings realistically were the first people to form a unified English state of any kind. Because up until this point, it was Roman, and then it was Celtic, and then it was infighting Anglo-Saxons, then it was Vikings.
Uh-huh.
So for a long time, it was Viking. Now, obviously, the Vikings brought over a lot of men, a lot of their religion. They came in, they destroyed Northumbria, like butchered everyone there because obviously they killed their dad. A little upset about that. So they did that. They came in, fucked them all up. King of Mercia, which was like the middle one, so that was like the rich people land, which it still is now in the middle country. The middle part of England is like the posh place. So Mercia, which were the people that owned the middle. So it was Wessex in the south, East Anglia on the right side on that little bulge here. That was like a lot of swamp and farmland. Wessex in the south were they were technologically quite good because they had a lot of trade with the French, who at the time were the Frankian Empire. Fucking wham, dude. Like, big boys. Like, Francia owned, like, a lot of northern Italy, some of Germany, all of France, what is now, like, the Netherlands and stuff. So, like, they were a big empire at the time. Like, the Carthaginian, like, like that. It was a weird period of time. Right. So, the English kingdoms were all infighting, and then the Vikings showed up and killed Northumbria, and I fucked everyone's kind of like mojo dojo up.
They did like the proper like battle royale strat.
Yeah,
it just came a third party.
Yeah, like the Vikings came in a third partied England. Yeah,
Viking Fortnite.
So the Great Heathen army showed up, laid siege to things like York and stuff. Mercia was defeated. So was Northumbria. All of northern England was like pretty Viking at this point. They had resettled a lot of the Anglo-Saxon people living there and actually founded Danish colonies. So there was a lot of Vikings actually living in England because although the Vikings are seen as like these great sackers and looters, what they really were traders and people who needed farmland. Because I don't know if you know a lot about up here in the world, but it's very cold, very snowy. Yeah, very snowy, very cold. Not a lot of farmland. The farmland's mostly on the coast around Denmark. If you live in northern Sweden or Norway, you ain't farming shit, dude. Especially not in this time period where there isn't the technology to be able to do that. If there's not fertile soil, nothing worked. So they used a lot of the farmland in England, and they just settled their own people there. The same way that, for instance, the Vikings sailed down the rivers in Russia and actually founded colonies all up and down the Volga River, which eventually became the Kievan Rus, which then founded Russia. So the Vikings brought both their culture, trade, and technology into Kiev to found the Kievan Rus, and eventually, became Russia. So Russia, Ukraine, all the Scandinavian countries, a lot of northern England, can all really trace its roots back to Viking traders and like Viking settlements. The Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire, the remnants of the Roman Empire, they had an elite guard called the Varangian Guards. They were Vikings who sailed down the Volga River trading, ended up in Constantinople, it being the largest city in the world at the time. It had walls like hundreds of meters high. It had technology no one had ever seen. For instance, they had fucking flamethrowers in the medieval age. It was called Greek fire. The Byzantines learned how to do it from the like Arabian people, and they had boats with dragon heads on the front that would spew fire onto other boats.
That's so cool.
It's sick, right? They had flamethrowers in the medieval age. Anyway.
Let me tell you something really quickly.
Yeah.
If you want to teach me anything and want me to be interested in it, tell me about this time period.
Yeah, it's
like Vikings
amazing.
and flamethrowers
It's
and shit.
amazing, dude. Yeah, so anyway, the Byzantine Empire, they had an elite guard called the Varangian Guard that were made up of Vikings. And it was almost like a military service thing for Vikings. They would go serve in the Varangian Guard for 5 to 10 years and then come home and they'd be honored as heroes. The Varangian Guard were the elite guard of the Emperor of the Byzantine Empire. So the Emperor of the Byzantine Empire surrounded himself with these warriors because they were the best warriors in the world. So these Vikings would take this like pilgrimage travel thing all the way down, trading, making money. Then they'd arrive in Constantinople and they'd stay in this city and they'd learn the language, they'd learn the culture, they'd learn all the like ideas, as well as fighting in their wars. A lot of like the Middle East, Italy, Greece, the Balkans, it was all wars fought using Viking soldiers that protected the emperor, which is such a cool,
That is very
like
cool.
These people from the far north also apparently settled the first colonies in Canada. We're talking in 700 AD. Canada was settled in the 1500s. That's almost 700, 800 years later. But these Viking people, like long ships and like old like stories written on rune stones, said there was a land further than Iceland and Greenland that people had colonized on, that people had settled on. But it never worked because far north, and unlike when the British and the Spanish and the French did it, they didn't have guns. They had swords and bows, the same as the native peoples, and so they weren't that like massive technologically advanced, able to stomp them, and it just didn't work. Also, given the fact that their ships, they're long ships, although they could traverse oceans, a lot longer. Took a lot longer. It wasn't these massive hulking ships that the British had to bring resources. It was long ships that could carry maybe 30 people. So the ability to bring resources and stuff to this place, if they couldn't support themselves, which they couldn't for a lot of it, just wouldn't have worked. But the Vikings did settle Iceland and Greenland, swapping their names around because it will be more funny for people to travel to a place full of ice if it sounds like it has green on it. So, going back to the Great Heathen Army, so I went on a bit of a tangent there. So they did all this Northern England shit, and then they were like, you know what? We've just realized there's rivers all over Europe. Why don't we just sail down the French River and sack Paris? Why not? It's this rich place. They've got crossbows. I want a crossbow. I'm going to go do that. So they sail down this river, and they fuck up all these villages along the French coast, and then they reach Paris, and the Parisian king goes, here's some money, go away. And they went, okay. So they left this Great Heathen Army. They were like, we'll turn around, we'll leave. So then every river in northern France becomes patrolled by Viking warriors for like 50 years, 60 years, right? Any ship that's going down this river, fucked. Any settlement that's on this river, fucked. The Vikings were like, we're taking all this, we'll take your stuff, and then we'll go trade it in Spain, because they sailed down there as well. Bear in mind, about 100 years earlier, the Vikings didn't even know England existed.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And now they're traveling to the Byzantines. They're traveling to Spain. They're sailing through France.
So did they know, I think you might have said it already, did they know that all of like Germany, Poland and stuff
So they knew like there was a northern coast here, but they'd never like gone in and like had a look at it, right? Because they're sailing people. They're not like land adventure people.
Gotcha.
So if there was a coast, they could generally find it.
They're playing on adventure mode.
Yeah, exactly. They're playing on adventure mode. But the Vikings did this really cool thing around Paris. It's a strategy that I just thought was really cool. The Parisians raised these big chains across the rivers so the boats couldn't go down them, because if you sailed into a big metal chain on a boat, your boat would fall apart because it's made of wood, right? So there were these big chains along that river. So what they did is they got their boats, put them on logs, pushed them over the hill around the river, went to the other side of the river, put their boats back in the water, and sailed up the other side. It's genius. So funny.
That makes me think of like when you see people like jumping the gates at like a train station or something. Instead of paying, like touching on with their Mikey, they're just jumping over the fence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's just what the Vikings did.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
They just didn't touch on.
They were doing all this whack shit. A lot of land in northern Netherlands was settled by the Vikings. That was like the Frisian lands. If you have a Google of that at home, we'll talk about that maybe later. Frisia was a land of like traders. It's really where like the whole Dutch mentality came from. Again, settled by Vikings. Vikings really created a lot of cultures throughout Europe. The French king, when that heathen army did like end up fucking up like a lot of the land in France, was like he approached one of the Vikings and was like, I will give you, because he was like one of the leaders of the armies, he was like, I will give you land in northern France if you help me defend against your Viking raids from your other like compatriots.
Interesting.
He said yes. And by doing that, founded the Duchy of Normandy. The Normans never forgot their kind of Viking roots. They conquered all of southern Italy. So southern Italy and northern France were both owned by a culture called the Normans, which were like a mix of French Viking culture.
Right.
And do you know what the Normans later went on to do? Conquer all of England under William of Normandy.
Oh.
Yeah. So William the Conqueror eventually created the what is now English culture. So again, the Vikings created what we now consider the English culture by mixing Northern French and Viking with Anglo-Saxon to form what we now consider the English culture.
I'll tell you what, England is getting tossed around.
England's history is a mess of being constantly invaded, which is strange because like a lot of the mentality, especially during like the like colonization and imperial age, was that England is this like invincible island that can't be invaded. But everything before that, it's getting spit roasted and ran a train on, dude. Like every country in Europe is running a train on this poor little island in northern Europe.
Petite England gets train run on.
It was just like a Viking and a French guy there.
It's that meme with fucking the 5 black guys standing behind the couch. But it's just titled of every single different place that ran train in England. Also, really quick, do you want more water?
No,
okay.
I'm good, thank you. So fuck's sake. Like the Viking culture spread all throughout Europe, including Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, the Mediterranean. They were the first real like explorers of Europe. They were big traders. So they weren't just this great warrior class that went around and killed everyone. They spread so much trade, language, culture. They created trade routes that those countries then used later in life. You know, like, for instance, the sailing down the river, the Byzantines hadn't done that. Otherwise, the Byzantines would have found the Vikings, but they didn't. So the Vikings sailed down these rivers and discovered them. And then later on, the Byzantines did the same thing when they turned Catholic. They would trade back and forth up and down these rivers. The Russian Empire, or the Kievan Rus, gained very rich from it because they would then be able to trade up and down their rivers as well.
Right.
Because of these trade routes and these exploration ventures that the Vikings did, a lot of Europe became quite interconnected. So although, yes, this great heathen army did come in and sack and destroy a lot of England, it was realistically out of revenge and as like payback. Right. What we know as the scary Viking was maybe like 15-20% of what the Vikings actually did.
Yeah, interesting.
They were just traders. They were explorers. They were adventurers. We know the Vikings as scary people because the French and the English and stuff, the people that we learned a lot of history about these Vikings of, because the Vikings didn't do a lot of they didn't write things on paper. They wrote them on rune stones. I don't know if you know a lot about water going down stones for a couple of 100 years, but it kind of rubs away what's on the stones. So we don't know a lot of it. There wasn't a lot of chronicles. What were they called? The Viking stories. The Viking. What were they called? The Viking stories.
Oh yeah, I was.
You know.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue, I swear.
Yeah. What were they called? The sagas. The sagas. They were written a lot later in the Viking history. I think the sagas were written towards the end of what we consider the Viking Age. which was like a brief history of their stuff. But that's where we start to lean a bit more into like the myth and things like that as well, because the sagas are quite like. And then he fought a snake that was 20 foot tall, and it missed his leg. And
that's crazy, because I was gonna say, like, as a joke, like, oh, so when did like the dragons come in and shit? And then you were literally like, oh yeah, so the big snakes.
Yeah, the sagas were very much like blown out of proportion.
They were all down here. That's where all the big snakes were.
Rainbow snake, baby.
I was pointing at Australia, by the way.
Yeah. So, the sagas and stuff were really where it like became a bit over the top. But a lot of the story was just like, at this time, like fame by word of mouth was important to especially a lot of like adventurers. For instance, like Harold Bluetooth was the man who like created a lot of trade routes through like northern England and stuff. And it's where we get the name Bluetooth for connecting
iPhone.
multiple things together. So like
Interesting.
yeah, so stuff like that. I think Harold Fairhair was the man who united Norway into one nation.
And he did hair dye tutorials.
No, but he did conquer England briefly for a little bit.
Close enough.
Little bit. He created what was called the North Sea Empire. Very cool. Cool guy. Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, after realistically these great heathen armies kind of like collapsed and their holds in England were pushed out by Alfred the Great, the man who united England under the first Anglo-Saxon king himself. He fought the heathen armies back, united all of the land that the heathen armies had taken, because at the time it was like all these independent countries.
Yeah.
But when the heathen army came in, they created what was called the Dane Law, which was like their little bit. And that owned like all of the we're talking like from the left side of England to the right, pretty much all the way down over London, kind of like this region here. So Wessex was left down here. That was like a long bottom bit. Otherwise, all of northern England and eastern England was all owned by Vikings. And when the army of Wessex helped with like some various like Welsh kingdoms, pushed out the Great Heathen Army, they were able to then occupy these lands, because all the kings and kingdoms that existed there at the time were fucked and dead, and it didn't matter. So Alfred united England because the Vikings invaded it first. The Great Heathen Army were defeated. They had to leave like England and stuff. A bunch of times, the Vikings tried to come back and like mess around. They took islands north of Scotland, the Hebrides, really famous now because one of their major flags is 3 Viking boats on top of each other. Because at the time it was founded or created by Vikings. Dublin, the capital of Ireland, founded by Vikings, didn't exist before Vikings showed up because they wanted a trade port in Ireland. So Ireland was massively trade ported by the Vikings as well. Those kind of things. Vikings founded a lot of what we now consider Great Britain. The Vikings did most of it, really, to begin with. Without the Viking invasions of England and the conquests in France, the Normans would have never been founded. Southern Italy wouldn't be so different from Northern Italy because they're so vastly different now because of the two vastly different cultures that realistically created the two kingdoms.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so like Southern Italy is a lot of farmland. The language is slightly different. It's the same. They can still speak Italian, but it's like different accents and stuff.
Right, yeah.
So Southern Italy and Sicily were all conquered by the Normans, who were descendants of Viking settlers that the French put there. So they went from northern France to southern Italy because they wanted stuff in the Mediterranean. And they were mercenaries. The Normans loved to fight. They were paid for a lot of the time. Sometimes Normans would end up fighting each other on different sides of combat and stuff. They were big mercenaries. Yeah, right. But yeah, they founded what was called Two Sicilies because it was Sicily and Sicily because they just considered it Sicily, the Kingdom of Sicily. And yeah, they actually defeated, because at the time Muslims owned a section of southern Italy and Sicily, which is in southern Italy, by the way. I've been pointing out for a while. Sorry, I should have said that. A lot of the northern African Muslim emirates took control of Sicily, and the Normans pushed them out. The Normans pushed them out and founded their own kingdom there. So southern Italy is a lot of vineyards, and it has a lot of Islamic influence in their way that the place was built, in the look of the buildings, in the way it was ran. The Normans just added that Northern European flavor to it, and then it became what is now. Realistically, hasn't changed very much in that long. So the Vikings really got around. Because of the Great Northern Army, Great Heathen Army, England was united. Normandy existed to then also conquer England later. Southern Italy existed. The Kievan Rus was founded, and thus eventually Russia. The Byzantines had one of the strongest fighting forces in the world. Iceland and Greenland were colonized, and Canada was discovered. And there are sources, I'm not sure if they're actually in any way correct, that say that Viking ships were found in places like South Africa, India, and Australia as well, which could happen.
Yeah.
Realistically.
Yeah, it does make sense.
They did go to Spain, Italy, and like Turkey.
Yeah.
Now modern day Turkey, then Istanbul, Constantinople, and the Byzantines. So sailing around this coastline isn't impossible. Sailing around the coastline of Africa is not impossible. Whether it actually happened or not,
for these big, strong, buff Viking men.
Big buff Viking men. Whether it actually happened or not, who knows? But they got around. They did a lot. And they were, I wanted to talk about it because a lot of people know them as these big, scary Viking men. Ginger, massive horns on their fucking helmet, came around killing everyone, but it's just not true.
They always have one bit of hair just braided all the way
exactly,
down.
man. They've got that massive ponytail. Like 25, maybe 30% of their population were like, these very scary warriors, and they were a warrior caste, like they were a warrior class of people, but they were also incredible traders, very, very skilled travelers, great sailors. The Vikings had this really weird thing where they would put a dial in some water and it would float, right? Like a little dial, and the sun would hit it and it would tell them what direction they're going. It was a compass.
Yeah, right.
And they were also some of the first like sailors to figure out that like constellations in the sky are the easiest way to travel at night. Wow. These people, this was like 500, 600, 800 AD. Realistically, the only time we saw any kind of navigators that were as talented as them were probably the Portuguese in the like 1500s. Again, 700-800 years later. These people were so incredibly talented at what they did, but it gets so overshadowed because the English and the French are butthurt because they went and sacked a couple of cities and killed some people,
and they got fucked a lot.
There was a lot of spit roasting going on.
And they even, thankfully enough, did not Eiffel Tower them. So, well, it's crazy to know that they went from like, they were like really good traders. They were really good at like a lot of shit, and now they're all really good TikTokers.
They are.
There's a large number of Vikings on TikTok. Have you seen that shit?
I have seen the Vikings on TikTok.
It's insane.
But a lot of them aren't Vikings. They're just American people who
Hang on, don't tell them that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no.
Don't tell them that. They might beat you to death.
I think I saw a video on the Vikings of TikTok recently. Yeah,
Curtis Connor made a video.
Yeah, that might be where I've seen it. Yeah, a bit cringy if I do say so myself. Bit cringe.
That's a cool thing to know, though, is that they weren't just like, big scary,
these bloodthirsty warriors.
Yeah. Well, because from what I heard, it was like, I heard that they just did a bunch of awful shit, but like,
so did everyone else in that time period. It's just like they were like the scary ones because they weren't Catholic.
Yeah,
they were scary because
they just always wanted to kill people and hurt people and stuff like that.
Because like, realistically, what they wanted was money. Yeah. What they wanted wealth. They wanted to grow their own personal wealth, their kingdom's wealth, their land, the same as everyone else did at the time. But because they were like this scary religion that was like, they sacrifice like people and goats, and they worship like weird
blood to the blood god.
Yeah, they worship like weird gods, and they have these weird traditions, and they look strange. But Vikings cared a lot about things like, for instance, their looks. Vikings would bathe almost daily.
That's so hot.
Which is crazy in the 700s because you'd be lucky if you bathed once a month in this time period, especially not everyone, because like peasants and like not because they weren't a feudal kingdom. They weren't feudal. They didn't have a king and peasants and knights and all that kind of thing. They were like tribal forces. So pretty much everyone was equal. There was a Jarl, the Jarl's Guard, and then everyone else. And the Jarl's Guard weren't like given more stuff. They were just like, you're coming with me, let's go do some fighting or something, right? Everyone was a soldier, everyone was a warrior, everyone was a trader, everyone was a merchant, everyone had their job, right? They weren't this feudal caste of you're a peasant, you're below me. It's a hello, my friend.
I have a quest for you.
Yeah, like it's like a hello, like friend, like you're equal, you're my brother. You know,
that's cool.
And that's really what the mentality of that area was, at least until like the Catholicism like reforms and the feudal like implementation later, when they did finally split into Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. That was really like around the Catholic kind of period conversion. And that really came around because they were trading and raiding and all that kind of thing. All of these nations that weren't their religion. Eventually, they were bringing some of it home. They were like, this sort of makes sense. And especially with like the traders, they were like, this is like a good idea. Like I kind of believe this god might be real. Like I get it. And eventually, it just kind of faded into nothing. The old Norse pantheon, unfortunately. Thor, Freya, Odin, those kind of lot. Just kind of
baggy pants.
Baggy pants wasn't a god, but I mean they saw him as a god, but he wasn't a god. So like that all kind of faded away, but they were incredible people. It's super, super interesting to learn really how much influence they had in what is now the shape of Europe.
This is why I love this podcast, is because like I just like I've recently stopped taking everything at face value, but like throughout my entire life, pretty much, it's like somebody will tell me this person is bad. This is a bad person that did bad thing. And I'm like, okay. But then it's like with this, it's like, and you wanting to learn about shit and wanting to teach this shit, where it's like, you can say this person did a bad thing and this is why, or like these people weren't what you thought they were or something like that. And this isn't just like you trying to make them seem like they're better. It's like you're pointing out facts and stuff like that, which is cool. So
they did do a lot of bad shit, don't get me wrong.
I mean, yeah.
But then the thing is that they did a lot of bad shit, but so did everyone in that time period, as I said before. Like it's not like the English kingdoms were anything shy of like constantly fighting each other, because they would constantly fight each other.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of killing, a lot of sacking, a lot of looting, the same way that there was that the Vikings did. But because the Vikings were not of their religion, and the people of England could write down their tellings, and the people of Scandinavia couldn't, they were the bad guys. They were the scary Vikings. They were the scary sackers that came from a foreign land. And don't get me wrong, they did awful shit. And that, like, those periods were. But they were also incredible traders, incredible navigators. So the most intuitive people that existed in the time period, some of the cleanest, some of the most well looked after. They would constantly get haircuts. There would be like constant like bathing, as I said. They were normally very clean people. Disease wasn't very common in Scandinavia, much like it isn't now.
I was going to say, they probably have like some crazy immune system as well, though, right? Because they just lived in the cold.
Yeah, like disease was not very common. Giant population centers were also not really a thing. It was a very spread out space.
Yeah, right.
It was very different. And I think that's why they're painted as the bad guys in a lot of history books. It's also cool, in air quotations, that they were this cool, great warrior that like could defeat anyone, right? It's boring to learn the fact that they sailed around rivers and discovered shit and stuff. That's boring, right? Quote unquote. But they did do things other than the big scary stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, they had some whack shit, like the Berserkers, for instance, who were just like generally 6 foot and above Vikings that would get high on hallucinogenic shrooms that were found in Sweden. Then they would fight for like multiple hours at a time and not like realistically feel pain.
That's what I want to do.
Like in the Battle of Hastings, which was when the England in 1066 came from Norway to invade northern England, and the French the Normans came from Normandy to invade England. William the Conqueror won, but the English king at the time, the Anglo-Saxon king, this is like a couple of hundred years after. a man in Norway decided, I'm going to try to take the King of England, like the Kingdom of England myself. And the Normans did it at the exact same time, and they got pincer moved. The English king traveled north to Hastings first, defeated the Norwegian army, but there was a man on a Battle of Stamford Bridge, and the English army was chasing the Viking army across this bridge, and this one berserker took as many hallucinogenics as he could and held the bridge against the English army for long enough for his Norwegian friends to leave, and they had to collapse the bridge underneath him because they couldn't kill him.
That's crazy.
One man against a whole army, and he held them for long enough that they had to collapse the bridge to be able to kill him.
One man and a whole lot of LSD.
One man and a whole lot of shrooms, baby. But yeah, like they had crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But then like they were what would
they also
possibly
liked to trade.
it could be what considered a shamanish kind of like culture. You know, they had things like oracles, like the Greeks did and the Romans did, where they would consult seers, as they were called, Seer, who were the people who could converse with the gods, and they would ask them, what should we do? What's going to happen? Similar to like fortune tellers now, just it was integrated into their religion and culture. It wasn't seen as like, that's just complete horseshit, you know? So they had these wild things, but again, it was just a different culture, a different religion, and a different people that did very intuitive things. That I don't know. That was the Vikings. I hope. Well, sort of. It was a brief. Again, always a brief look.
Always brief.
Always a brief look, because there's only so much I can say in an hour.
Yeah. It's always brief, and I think as well as that, it's like it encourages you to, if you want to learn more about it.
Yeah, because they are super interesting.
You said the berserkers were over 6 foot.
Generally, yes.
Do you want to measure me and see if I'm also over 6 foot?
I don't think you would have been a berserker.
Come on, man.
I don't think so.
This is an audio podcast, but I just want everyone to know my muscles are fucking huge.
Your body structure just wasn't there. Your arms aren't wide enough.
What are you saying?
You haven't got enough muscle on you.
I could beat a horse.
Yeah, you reckon?
Yeah.
One hit.
Don't even need one.
I've always said sheep is the highest I'd ever go. We had a conversation about this.
We did.
I could fight a sheep. I could beat a sheep. I think sheep is the largest animal I could beat in it, and like a 1v1.
Yeah, but we didn't want to go into details about how the gruesome murder of a sheep that you would do.
You just said you'd beat a horse, man.
I would just beat it up.
Yeah.
Until it's like...
Do you know how much muscle is on a horse?
Do you know how much muscle is on my biceps?
Yeah, I could fucking see, mate.
I'm wearing a big shirt.
You could fit your arm in a Pringles can. That's how like thin your arms are, mate.
That's crazy. Yeah, what the fuck is this? I thought we were supposed to be friends. I thought you would like have my back all the time and stuff.
What do you mean? And lie and pretend you're going to be a berserker?
Have my
You just want to do shrooms, don't you?
Yes, that was the plan. The plan was to see if I could get a prescription and say I'm a berserker in the Nordic army, and then see if they either give me shrooms or book me in, like the mental institute.
Yeah.
If I walked in and flexed my muscles and said I am a berserker and a Viking and I need shrooms stat,
they'd probably be like, let's book you into a different kind of hospital.
So this is a Wendy's.
Yeah, exactly. Like, anyway, that was the Great Heathen Army. That was a brief look into some of the like kind of expeditions of the Viking Age that the Vikings undertook, and then kind of what they did, how they affected some pretty major areas of Europe. Do you have any questions, Jack? Do you have anything?
I have a question that's not at all related to what you just spoke about, but still like geography. When you were talking about like England and stuff like that, the thing that's always like fucked with my brain, and I think I've asked you this before, what is England, what is the UK, and what is Britain?
So Britain is comes from the term Breton or Brittonic, which was the like group or the culture group that was kind of like classed as like post or during Roman occupation. So Britons or British people, that's like the culture.
Right.
Yeah. The United Kingdom is the United Kingdoms of Wales, Scotland, what was Ireland but is now Northern Ireland, and England.
Right.
So the United Kingdom, so Scotland has its own parliament. I I don't know if Wales does, which is awful, and I know I should know, but I don't know.
Boo.
I don't know. But how England and Scotland became united? England had already conquered Wales through military means. Most of Ireland was conquered through military means as well.
Mhm.
Scotland, when Queen Elizabeth I died, the Tudor, daughter of Henry VIII, divorced, beheaded, that guy. That guy.
Poor guy.
Yeah, hell well. She died with no heirs, and the closest heir they had was the son of Mary Queen of Scots, who was her sister, who happened to be the King of Scotland at the time. He was a Stuart. That was their royal family. So he came down from Scotland to be in charge of England, and because he was already the King of Scotland, he united the two kingdoms.
Right.
And that was the start of what was Great Britain, which eventually became the United Kingdom.
So it's not Great Britain anymore.
Not anymore.
Okay, so
That was its imperial name.
Yeah, I think that's something that always confused me because I was like, I know that England is not all of it.
See, you can still call it Great Britain. Great Britain and United Kingdom are the same thing, but United Kingdom...
that's made things so much easier.
So Great Britain and the United Kingdom are the same thing, but Great Britain, what it was quote-unquote considered, was like all of the land of Ireland, all of Scotland... those kind of things. Its name originates from like quite an imperialist standpoint.
Yeah.
The United Kingdom is a far more modern way to name that kind of section.
Mm-hmm.
Each kingdom is its own thing. They're like autonomous people that are under the same banner.
Yeah, right.
They all have their own voting system. They all have their own like cultures and people. They're just united under one thing. Consider them all sort of like, as much as I hate saying this, the American states.
Yeah. Okay.
How each state has its own governor, its own laws, its own rules, is the same thing in the United Kingdom. Each kingdom has its own rules and states. They're just called kingdoms instead of states. All are like topped by like the English Parliament, the same way that all are topped by the like presidential cabinet.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, they all have their own semi-autonomous way of running things.
You know what, John? You didn't have my back, but I'll have yours. I think that kingdom sounds cooler than state.
Way cooler than states, right? Imagine. But also, like, Scotland has its own church, for instance. It has the Church of Scotland, whereas England has the Church of England. Wales is just Wales. Poor guys. Always left behind.
Where's Scotland?
Everywhere. So because it's showing the United Kingdom, it's not going to be separate kingdoms, but pretty much like this line here. Oh, you can see it actually if you look really close. You see that checkered line right there, just above my finger? Yeah, that checkered line. Anything north of that's Scotland.
Oh,
so literally.
Oh right. Wait, yeah. I was literally looking for that.
Yeah, so like pretty much anything. I'm just gonna like cut it off like there.
Yeah, right.
Anything north of that. So Edinburgh, Glasgow. Edinburgh is one of the oldest cities in the world. You know.
Huh.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
So it's Scotland, England, and Wales.
Scotland, England, Northern Ireland,
Wales,
Ireland. Because Northern Ireland is still technically under the United Kingdom.
Right. Oh, that's my brain will finally function at a human level now. Like my entire life, because my dad is British.
Yeah.
And I would be like, but he's not British, he's English.
Yeah, no,
because he's from England.
Yeah.
And so
anyone who is within the United Kingdom can call themselves British,
right? Yeah.
Because it's the culture. British is just the name of the culture, the same way as you would call a French person French.
Yeah, right.
But there are also people in France who would call themselves Norman or Aquitanian or that kind of thing. Like there are people in the United States who say, "Oh, I'm Californian."
Yeah, right.
Rather than I'm American.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same way people in England will go, I'm English. People in Scotland will go, I'm Scottish.
Yeah, okay.
But you can also say I'm American or I'm British.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that makes... I feel whole again, finally. Just saying that, I mean, the comparison that you hated saying that the kingdoms in the United Kingdom is similar to just the states in the US, where it's just like...
They're just like semi-autonomous groups within a united government. Yeah.
Maybe it's the TikTok brain in me, but when I looked at the US when you were talking about something, the first thing that I saw was Ohio. So like,
yikes!
I'm from the Kingdom of Ohio.
Ohio. Yeah.
Well, thanks for teaching me. Oh,
That's
this is so cool.
Have you got any other questions? Is there anything else you want me to rest your brain on now that I've just blown your mind?
The entire time that you were talking about like England and also Britain, I was like,
Well, because at the time it was technically called Britain,
Hmm.
and then it became England. But England wasn't the United Kingdom then. It didn't have all of these countries. It just had England. England was its own kingdom.
Right.
All the kingdoms were fully independent. There was no any form of united until
Gotcha.
that Scottish king in like the 1600s became the king of England, and that was when
That was when
Great
Scotland
Britain,
and then United Kingdom.
and that was when it became the United Kingdom or Great Britain, which it was at the time, as it was imperialist. Then it moved away from that name because Great Britain, yikes, connotations. So
That's cool.
yeah.
And learning about Vikings and shit is cool as well. Like
It's
I
the
love
early Middle Age, or like the high Middle Ages. A lot of people know about that was when there were like knights and like chivalry and stuff. But the Dark Ages before that, no one talks about it, and it's one of the coolest periods of history, bro. There were Vikings, all the English kingdoms were split. Fucking, they had flamethrowers, bro.
I was literally gonna say, John just taught me about how Vikings like went into England and like raided all of England, and also flamethrowers in the time span of like 10 minutes.
There were flamethrowers in the world at the time. They had other cool shit too, like they learned about the Chinese auto crossbows. It was like a crossbow with a literal magazine on top.
Fire.
And it would go tung, 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 tung.
And then it turned into the Type 95.
Yeah.
So-
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, the Type 95 is Japanese, but that's fine. We won't talk about that.
Oh shit, I'm racist.
Anything that says type before it's a Japanese weapon.
Huh.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah, there you go. Look at
Learn 5 different things every day,
that.
every weekend.
Yeah, so that was the Vikings.
That was the heathen army, the Great Heathen army.
which was realistically only a few thousand people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's still great.
It's still great at the time. Very scary.
The things they did though, not so great.
Not so great.
But
the things
cool
the
for
Vikings
history.
did, the things the Vikings did in general, though,
Yeah.
pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, it is cool. All right.
Awesome.
Well,
I think we're done here.
yeah, we're going to wrap it up. As always, if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you rate us 5 stars because it moves us up that chart. Super helpful for us, and also means that we know that you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Keep downloading. Super cool of you. It's a really
we
cool
consider
stat that we can
downloads.
actually pay attention to, see if you're enjoying it and stuff. That'd be great. If you're listening on YouTube, leave a like, drop a comment as to what you might want us to talk about, if you had any opinions. If I was wrong, and I say this every single podcast, if I was wrong about anything, or you want to correct me, or you want to teach me, I love learning. If I say something wrong or you don't agree with what I say, shoot me a tweet on Twitter, on X. Sorry, shoot me an X on X. It's linked anywhere on whatever you're watching this on. It's just what is it? John Real Talk.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I made it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's a cool name.
Yeah.
When I clicked on your Twitter and I looked and it said co-host of the Real Talk podcast, I was like, shit, it's so official now.
That's us. Yeah.
It's so
Anyway,
official.
shoot me a tweet on there. Tell me I was wrong. Laugh at me. Call me an idiot. I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn, baby. Here to learn. Here to teach. You know. Same with Jack. Shout at him. Laugh at him. Tell him he's silly Billy.
Just because I compared fucking baggy pants to MrBeast does not.
I
What was his name? Ragnar?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so smart. You can't laugh at me. You can't joke about. You can't yell at me
Big
being
brain boy.
stupid because I'm smart.
What a big brain boy.
And maybe Ragnar is MrBeast. So
Mr.
that being said, thank you all for listening. Django's all cranky. You might be able to hear him whining. Yeah.
Love you guys.
Appreciate you.
Kisses.
Every time. Every fucking
Kisses.
time.